I still remember the look in his eyes when he left me stranded in those Colorado mountains, 1 week after our wedding. But I also remember that exact same face 3 months later, when I left him with exactly $500,000 in debt. He thought I was just another golden trophy he'd married to show off, but I was the one gamble he should never have made. Some women cry when they're betrayed, others get even. I chose option 2. And by the time I was done, he learned that leaving your wife 500 miles from civilization comes with a price tag he couldn't afford. My name is Madeline Carter, though everyone calls me Maddie. At 32, I'd built a reputation as the go-to communications director at Westgate Media Solutions in Dallas. I knew how to craft messages that moved people, how to spin narratives that stuck. What I didn't know was that I was about to become the subject of someone else's carefully crafted story. Ryan Maddox walked into my life on a Tuesday in March. All polished confidence and tailored suits. He owned a boutique investment firm, small but profitable, he assured me, and needed our agency to handle PR for a charity gala he was sponsoring. 6 feet tall with graying temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. Ryan had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. Our first meeting ran 2 hours past schedule. He was charming in that effortless way that successful men often are, asking thoughtful questions about my work, my goals, my life. When he suggested dinner to continue our discussion, I surprised myself by saying yes. I'd always been cautious about mixing business with pleasure, but Ryan felt different. Safe. Solid. The courtship was a masterpiece of timing and attention. Flowers arrived at my office with handwritten notes. He remembered details I'd mentioned in passing. My favorite wine, the book I was reading, my sister's birthday. Within 6 weeks, we were exclusive. Within 3 months, he was talking about forever. Looking back, I can see how calculated it all was. How he studied my responses, learned my weaknesses, identified exactly what I needed to hear. But in the moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world when he proposed at the top of Reunion Tower. The Dallas skyline sparkling below us like scattered diamonds. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of and more. We held it at the historic Cabildo in New Orleans, with magnolia arrangements and a jazz quartet that played while we exchanged vows. Ryan had insisted on paying for everything. "Let me spoil you," he'd said, brushing away my protests about the cost. My parents flew in from Oregon, beaming with pride. His family was notably absent, but he'd explained they were complicated people he preferred to keep separate from his new life. 300 guests toasted our happiness with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. I felt like I was floating through a fairy tale, my dress rustling like whispered promises as Ryan spun me around the dance floor. "Mrs. Maddox," he murmured against my ear during our first dance, and I shivered with pleasure at the sound of my new name. If only I'd known then what that name would cost me. If only I'd seen the trap being set with rose petals and champagne, with whispered endearments and promises of forever. But predators are patient, and Ryan had been planning this hunt long before he ever walked into my office. The perfect wedding was just the perfect beginning to his perfect crime. Adventure Honeymoon, Ryan called it, his eyes lighting up with boyish enthusiasm as he outlined his plans. Forget the typical beach resort, Maddie. Let's do something we'll remember forever. Aspen in late spring seemed like the perfect compromise between luxury and adventure. The mountain lodge he'd booked was rustic but elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the snow-capped peaks like living postcards. For the first 3 days, it was everything I'd imagined. We hiked trails that wound through pine forests, drank wine by the fireplace, made love with the kind of passion that comes from knowing you have forever ahead of you. Then came Thursday morning. "Emergency meeting," Ryan announced, his phone pressed to his ear as he paced the lodge's wooden deck. "The Peterson deal is falling apart. I have to fly back to Dallas immediately." I watched him pack with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Though I didn't register the significance of that observation at the time, his movements were too practiced, too quick, like muscle memory. "Come with me," I said, already reaching for my own suitcase. No, He caught my hands, his grip just firm enough to stop me without seeming controlling. You stay, enjoy the mountains. I'll be back tomorrow night, Saturday at the latest. We'll extend the trip. Make up for lost time. Something cold flickered in his eyes. There and gone so quickly, I almost missed it. Almost. Ryan, I don't want to stay here alone. You're not alone. The lodge staff is here. It's completely safe. He kissed my forehead, the gesture somehow patronizing rather than tender. Besides, this is our honeymoon suite, paid for through the week. Might as well use it. The rental car disappeared down the mountain road in a cloud of dust, taking with it the last normal moment of my life. I tried calling him that evening, straight to voicemail. I tried again the next morning. The number was disconnected. That's when I found the note, not left on the pillow like some romantic gesture, but tucked inside my purse where I'd find it eventually. The handwriting was Ryan's, but the words belonged to a stranger. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The marriage was a business arrangement that has served its purpose. Don't look for me. Don't call me. Consider this a clean break. The lodge is paid through Sunday. After that, you're on your own. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Then I read it again, waiting for the punchline, the hidden camera, the moment when Ryan would jump out laughing and tell me it was all an elaborate joke. The silence of the mountains was my only answer. No phone signal, no car, no husband. The nearest town was 15 miles down a winding mountain road, and I was wearing designer heels and a sundress. The lodge staff had mysteriously vanished too, probably paid off or given the weekend off. I spent the next 2 days walking, 15 miles of twisted ankle and blistered feet, of catching rides with concerned strangers who asked too many questions I couldn't answer. By the time I reached Denver Airport, I understood what had happened to me. I just didn't yet understand why. The why would come later, along with the rage that would fuel everything that followed. The Dallas apartment we'd shared for 3 months was stripped bare. Not just empty, methodically cleaned out. The furniture, the artwork, even the coffee maker I'd brought from my old place. Gone. The only things left were a few of my clothes hanging in the closet like abandoned ghosts and a stack of bills on the kitchen counter with my name on them. Bills I'd never seen before, credit cards I'd never applied for, loan documents bearing my signature, signatures I didn't remember signing, a mortgage application for a property in Houston I'd never heard of. All of it adding up to a debt load that made my stomach turn. $127,000 and climbing. I called the bank first. Our joint account, the one I'd transferred my savings into after the wedding, had been drained 3 days ago. Every penny of the $85,000 I'd contributed was gone. The account was closed. But I'm a joint account holder, I told the customer service representative, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. Yes, ma'am. But Mr. Maddox was the primary account holder. He had full withdrawal privileges. Next, I called my credit card companies. 4 new cards had been opened in my name over the past 2 months, all maxed out. When I explained that I hadn't authorized these accounts, the fraud department was sympathetic but clear. The applications had been filed from my home address with my social security number and perfect forgeries of my signature. We'll investigate, Mrs. Maddox, but you'll need to file a police report first. Mrs. Maddox. The name felt like poison in my mouth now. My sister Emily drove down from Oklahoma City that weekend, took one look at the evidence spread across my kitchen table, and said what I was thinking. This isn't random, Maddie. This is a pattern. She was right. A Google search for Ryan Maddox Dallas investment turned up nothing. But Ryan Maddox fraud led us down a rabbit hole that made my blood run cold. A woman named Jennifer Patterson had posted on a financial fraud forum about a man matching Ryan's description who'd married her in Phoenix 2 years ago, cleaned out her accounts, and vanished. Another woman, Sarah Kim, had a similar story from Atlanta. Always the same pattern: whirlwind romance, quick marriage, financial devastation. I wasn't Ryan's wife. I was his latest mark. The police report felt like a joke. The detective, a tired-looking man who'd clearly seen this before, took down my information with the enthusiasm of someone filling out a grocery list. Marriage fraud is hard to prosecute, he explained. He was legally your husband. Joint accounts, shared assets. It's all technically legal. The credit cards are trickier, but proving forgery when you live together? It's an uphill battle. My parents called daily, their voices thick with worry and barely contained rage. Come home, my mother pleaded. Stay with us until you get back on your feet. We'll help you rebuild. But I wasn't ready to rebuild, not yet. Because somewhere in the haze of betrayal and financial ruin, a different emotion was crystallizing. Not heartbreak. That was too clean, too simple. This was something harder, sharper, something that tasted like blood and burned like acid. I wasn't going to be another cautionary tale on a fraud forum. I wasn't going to slink back to Oregon with my tail between my legs. Another victim of Ryan Maddox's carefully orchestrated con. I was going to be the one who ended his winning streak. The first rule of revenge is patience. The second is information. I had plenty of the first and needed more of the second. I started with Ryan's business connections. My job at Westgate had given me access to Dallas's financial network, and I used every contact I'd cultivated over the years. Lunch meetings with investment bankers, coffee dates with venture capitalists, casual conversations at industry events. I played the role of the concerned ex-wife trying to understand what had gone wrong. And people were surprisingly willing to talk. Marcus Webb, a senior analyst at Pinnacle Capital, was the first to give me something useful. Ryan's been sniffing around for months. He told me over drinks at the Mansion Bar. Looking for backing on some energy sector play? Big numbers, 2 million, maybe more. But something felt off about his pitch. That something, I learned, was Ryan's financial history. He'd been turned down by 3 major firms in the past 6 months. His investment company was leveraged to the breaking point, sustained only by the cash injections from his marriage schemes. But he was close to landing something big, a credit facility with Meridian Trust that would give him access to the kind of money that could fund his next disappearing act. I spent weeks mapping his network. Ryan's business partner, David Kowalski, was the front man for most of their legitimate dealings. Their office was a rented suite in a mid-tier building in Plano. Impressive enough to fool potential marks, but cheap enough to abandon quickly. They had 3 active investment projects, all funded by money stolen from previous wives. The breakthrough came when I discovered Ryan's pattern wasn't just about theft, it was about identity. He'd been using his wife's credentials to secure loans and lines of credit, then defaulting after the divorce. The women were left holding the debt while he moved on to the next city, the next identity, the next victim. But this time, he'd made a mistake. This time, he'd married someone who understood how information flows in corporate America. I created Falcon Ridge Consulting, LLC on a Tuesday morning, filing the paperwork from a coffee shop in Deep Ellum. The company existed only on paper, a shell corporation designed for one purpose, to buy distressed debt, specifically, Ryan's distressed debt. The beauty of debt collection is that it's a secondary market. Banks and credit card companies regularly sell uncollectible accounts to third parties for pennies on the dollar. All you need is capital and the willingness to chase down deadbeats. I had both. My first purchase was a $43,000 credit line that Ryan had defaulted on under one of his previous identities. Cost me $4,300, but it gave me legal standing to pursue his assets. The second was a business loan he'd taken out 6 months ago, before he'd met me. That one cost me $12,000, but came with a personal guarantee he'd signed. While I was building my debt portfolio, I was also building my intelligence network. I hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent named Patricia Moore who specialized in white-collar crime. She confirmed what I'd suspected. Ryan was already setting up his next con. A woman named Rebecca Torres in Austin, recently divorced, with a substantial settlement from her tech executive ex-husband. But the real prize was the Meridian Trust deal. $2 million in funding for a renewable energy project that existed only in PowerPoint presentations. Ryan was scheduled to close the deal in 3 weeks. and the money would be wired to an account in the Cayman Islands within hours of signing. I couldn't let that happen. That's when I discovered the power of strategic misinformation. A few carefully placed calls to Meridian's risk management team, questions about Ryan's background, his previous partnerships, his financial stability. Not accusations, just concerns from a potential investor who'd been burned before. The deal stalled, then it crumbled. And Ryan Maddox, for the first time in his criminal career, found himself scrambling to cover debts he couldn't pay. That's when I made my move. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Ryan's voice was strained, carefully controlled. But I could hear the desperation underneath. "Maddie, we need to talk." I let the silence stretch between us, savoring the moment. 3 months of planning had led to this. The hunter becoming the hunted. "I'm listening," I said finally. "Not over the phone. Meet me at Café Brazil. 1 hour." He looked older when I walked into the restaurant, his confident swagger replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man under siege. The expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He'd been sleeping poorly. I could see it in the dark circles under his eyes. "You look well," he said as I sat down across from him. "I feel better than I have in months." He studied my face, searching for something. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Ryan, I'm not angry. I'm impressed. You played me perfectly. The romance, the wedding, the disappearing act. It was masterful." His confusion was genuine. This wasn't the broken, desperate ex-wife he'd expected to find. "What do you want, Maddie?" "I want to talk about your debt problem." The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I placed a manila folder on the table between us. "Meridian Trust pulled their financing. Pinnacle Capital won't return your calls. Your creditors are getting impatient." I opened the folder, revealing documents he recognized. Especially this one. The loan agreement was for $247,000, a business credit line he'd taken out 8 months ago using forged documents and my identity as collateral. The same loan that Falcon Ridge Consulting had purchased 3 days ago for $24,700. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Check the signature at the bottom of the transfer agreement." His eyes widened as he saw my name, not as the victim, but as the new creditor. The woman he'd abandoned in the mountains was now the owner of his largest debt. "You can't do this. It's not legal." "Actually, it's completely legal. Debt trading is a legitimate business practice. I even have a lawyer who specialized in collections law. Very thorough man. He's already filed the preliminary paperwork for asset seizure." Ryan's hands were shaking now. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to be abandoned. To wake up one morning and discover that everything you thought was real was actually a lie." I leaned forward. "I want you to experience the same helplessness you've inflicted on Jennifer Patterson, Sarah Kim, and God knows how many other women. You don't understand. I can pay you back. I have deals in the works. Like Rebecca Torres in Austin. She's lovely, by the way. We had such an interesting conversation yesterday. She was very grateful to learn about your previous marriages. Very grateful indeed." The last bit of color left his face. His Austin mark was gone. And with it, his final escape route. "I also took the liberty of sharing some information with your business partner. David was quite surprised to learn about your creative accounting practices. He's already filed dissolution papers for your company. Apparently, he doesn't want to be associated with someone under investigation for fraud." "Investigation?" "The FBI takes marriage fraud very seriously, especially when it crosses state lines. They're particularly interested in your activities in Phoenix and Atlanta. Jennifer Patterson was very helpful in providing documentation." Ryan slumped back in his chair, the fight going out of him. "What do you want from me?" I closed the folder and stood up. "I want you to remember this moment. When you're lying awake at night, wondering how you're going to pay your bills, wondering if you'll have a roof over your head tomorrow. I want you to think about that lodge in Colorado. I want you to remember the woman you left stranded in the mountains." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Oh, And Ryan, the full balance on your loan is due in 30 days. My lawyer will be in touch about the collection process. The last thing I saw was his reflection in the cafe window, a broken man staring at the ruins of his perfectly constructed life. The auction was held on a crisp October morning at the Dallas County Courthouse. I didn't attend. I had no desire to watch Ryan's final humiliation in person. But my lawyer called with updates throughout the day, his voice barely containing his amusement. The Porsche went for $62,000, the artwork collection brought in another $45,000, and get this, someone bid on his golf clubs. Apparently, they were custom-made. By noon, everything Ryan Maddox had owned was gone. His downtown condo, his luxury car, his carefully curated collection of expensive toys, all sold to satisfy the debt he owed to Falcon Ridge Consulting. The final tally was $511,000, which meant I'd not only recovered my stolen money, but turned a profit on my revenge. The FBI investigation moved forward without me. Jennifer Patterson and Sarah Kim had provided enough evidence to build a solid case for interstate fraud. Ryan would face trial within the year, and his days of preying on vulnerable women were over. But the real satisfaction came 2 weeks later, when I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten note in Ryan's familiar script. You were right. I remember every detail of that morning in Colorado. I remember your face when you realized what I'd done. But I also remember thinking you were just another victim who would cry and disappear. I was wrong. You weren't the victim in this story. Maddie, you were the predator I never saw coming. I burned the note that evening, watching the paper curl and blacken in my fireplace. With it went the last connection to the man who'd thought he could destroy me. 6 months later, I received a call from a woman named Lisa Martinez in Phoenix. She'd found my name in a fraud forum, the same one where Jennifer Patterson had first posted about Ryan. Lisa was asking for help. She'd been contacted by a man claiming to be an investment advisor. And something about his approach felt familiar. I spent an hour on the phone with her, sharing everything I'd learned about recognizing and stopping financial predators. By the end of our conversation, she was crying, not from fear, but from relief. I almost fell for it, she whispered. If you hadn't shared your story, I would have lost everything. That's when I understood the real value of what I'd been through. Ryan Maddox was behind bars, but there were others like him out there, spinning their webs of romance and deception. And there were women like Lisa, smart, successful, but vulnerable to the right kind of manipulation. The best revenge isn't just stopping one predator, it's making sure his methods die with him. Ryan left me 500 miles from our honeymoon. I left him $500,000 in debt. But more importantly, I left him with the knowledge that his victims had found their voice. And we were never going to be silent again. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from? Please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and location so we can connect with fellow listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your own thoughts about this tale of calculated revenge. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life.